Hi, everyone. This is Chris Grasso with the Indie Spiritualist podcast on Ram Dass's Be Here Now network. And my guest today is Marisa Michelson. Marisa, thank you so much for being here.
I am delighted to be here. So happy
And as we were sharing right before we started, I told Marisa that, we don't edit much, whatever comes up. And right off the bat, I'm dropping ball on your name. My apologies, but here we are. This is real life. So yeah, Marisa, I'm going to read your bio for my listeners who may not be familiar with your work. And we are going to get into a lot of music talk, some somatic things, some psychedelic things, and wherever else the winds take us today. So let me start with this, and then we'll get on with the show. So Marisa has worked with Broadway stars, opera singers, therapists, C-level executives, tantra practitioners, and others drawn to transformational somatic singing for over 20 years. She holds the highest diploma level from the Libero Canto School of Singing and founded the School of Vocal D'Amri, a somatic, holistic approach to singing and voice giving that connects us more intimately with the layered dimension of self. An award-winning composer, Marisa has created musicals, oratorios, chamber orchestra works, and experimental music theater pieces produced off-Broadway and performed across the country. She was the founding director of Constellation Corps, a psychedelic vocal performance ensemble exploring the intersection of voice, movement, ritual, and musical theater. Constellation Corps performed extensively in New York City and internationally, including a 2018 premiere with the New York Philharmonic at Lincoln Center. Marisa's compositions are available on major streaming platforms. She lives, works, and teaches in upstate New York, and a very beautiful area of upstate New York, if I can add it. Marisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris.
So let's talk about your work. It's something that vocal de-armoring is something I had never heard of before, and something you've created, correct? Is this your own?
Yeah, I would say vocal de-armoring is, in fact, the name for my business. And I say that intentionally you could also say it's a modality, but I actually kind of like thinking of it as a brand or a business because it's working with voice and the body and the psyche. And when you get into a space with someone, as I know you know, a million different things can happen. So vocal de-armoring is an approach, not a kind of method, and it's not one thing with a bunch of rules, but it's actually an orientation based around certain principles of singing and singing freely that impact all people who are professional singers, and also people who have never sung before, or people who want to sing or love to sing, or just people who don't even want to sing but want to explore the underexplored territory of the voice to get closer into contact with themselves at a somatic and a psyche and spiritual level. And I do want to also say it emerged out of what you said in my bio, the Libero Canto School. So that is a school that is specifically geared towards singing, and it comes very intimately out of the Western European classical genre. But the approaches used inside that school are so mind-blowing and expansive that I have taken that work to bring it into many different kind of fields and put the name vocal de-armoring. But it didn't have to have a name until I started teaching other teachers. And it started to feel like, okay, let's give it a name. There's something interesting to me anyway about naming something, because we're really working with the great mystery, the mystery. And the name kind of pulls it down to earth and says, it kind of limits it. necessarily, since we're in a finite field.
Right.
And that's important, especially in communicating what it is to humans. But I never want to lose sight of the fact that it's really, in the ultimate world, it's nameless. It belongs to no one. It doesn't belong to me. It's available for everyone. The ways of working with the voice and transformation and alchemy and freedom. This is limitless and available. And then vocal de-armoring is a name for the way that I approach that through my lineage and my training and my experience.
Yeah.
The way that other people approach it now as well. Yeah.
So what you're saying echoes a lot of, the various great wisdom traditions that I've read and study, and I really appreciate your verbiage around it. Can you talk a little bit? You mentioned the lineage. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that helped you create or allow this vocal de-armoring and what you do to flow through you? However that expresses itself.
Yeah. So Libero Canto is a school of singing that has an incredible story. Of the kind of founder, Lajos Samosi was his name, was a Hungarian Jew and a cantor. And he was doing a lot of work in the 1920s before World War II. And I won't get so much into that story, but I'll say that, like most kind of innovations, he experienced in his own body a block, a challenge, and something he could not find help with. And so he set out and searched and met with all these voice teachers at the time and vocal therapists and psychologists, and set on this long journey to see, like, what is going on with my voice and my singing that is not exactly feeling right. And from the outside, it's not like they would have noticed. They're like, you're fine. But he's like, there's something wrong. So it was through his journey that he developed this approach. And libero canto means essentially free singing. And it's a kind of mind-blowing approach for its time, long before what's, somatic experiencing today, Peter Levine's amazing work,
Right.
or Hart's work, or it's like long before that he was working with the body so deeply somatically. And of course, again, somatic work doesn't belong to anyone, and it has been around and alive in cultures around the world since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
But it was innovative and unique to bring that particular kind of somatic relationship into the classical music world. So the classical singing world was very methodical, and the kind of very sound focused and controlled. And it's also somewhat, it's about high level singing. So there's a certain amount of perfectionism that we all come to when we're seeking to sing at the highest level. But he found, through very simple practices and processes, these ways that actually unlocked people's bodies. And he was very interested at the time in what was going on at that time within the field of psychology. And he was really bringing together a lot of different pieces. So my experience with this is that, so his son and daughter brought that forward. And then his son, Edvin Samosi, was the teacher of my teacher. So I met my teacher in New York City over 20 years ago, and it completely changed my life. Completely changed my life. I was young, but I didn't feel young. I felt very stuck and very, very sad about that. And it expressed itself in my singing, which I did have these glimpses as a child of, like, singing can be an experience of true expression and even transcendence. kind of bliss and joy and creativity. But because of different traumatic experiences or interactions with the culture that we live in, that I grew up in North America, like most people experience, then there were a lot of conditioned responses and holdings that started to occur in my body. So at the nervous system level, for example, a lot of freeze and collapse. And what this meant was that when I sang, as I got older and then went to college to study singing professionally, I felt like there was something I wasn't able to make happen. And I was trying to push to make it happen. And my teachers tried to help me figure out how to make it happen in all sorts of mechanical ways, like lift your soft palate, or now hold open your ribs as you let out your breath, or lots of ways of working with the body, totally well-meaning, that did not yield fruit to me from the inside out. Again, I'm not sure how it would be from the outside in, but from the inside out, there was a feeling in me of stuckness, that there were all of these energies inside me that were in conflict, at war with each other, and at war with my own body. I was extremely disembodied. I didn't know I had a body, really, despite doing external activities like dance and theater. But there was a real pain. I had chronic pain and insomnia from a very young age, and singing, which it was like a painful experience, because it was both a place I could go to feel connected to myself, but also where I'd go and I'd realize how disconnected from myself I was. And when I met my teacher, everything changed. It was so incredible. I began what was a very long, over 20 years process, and will continue to be a lifelong process of learning the language of my body and my psyche, and from the physical body, and from working with the nervous system, finding a way to sing where all of these trapped energies that didn't know how to move or where to go started to learn over time how to, on their own, find expression. And this experience of finding expression, wow, I almost want to cry talking about it. It was bliss at so many times, and bliss in a large sense of the word, because sometimes it was very painful as well. But this feeling of my body working as one with me, us all as a kind of unit, and channeling these impulses and energies into something that felt genuine, was extraordinary, and it was only the beginning. So that, and you asked about the lineage part of it, and I guess if there's anything else I want to say, I want to just really acknowledge and honor that lineage, because it's been really, really wonderful for me to have a path that I could feel devoted to. And I think part of the reason I felt able to devote myself to that path, not at the expense of everything else, but as kind of a central, true channel, was because there's a lot of room for your own agential experience, not from the teacher, from the outside in, telling you with a lot of direct guidance what is supposed to happen, what you should be feeling, but actually it's opening up a space of exploration where you can find yourself. And that was a path I felt I could go on.
That resonates with when I found Ram Dass's work. Very, very similar experience. Different, it wasn't through
Yeah,
voice and singing, but
right.
I was young when I found his work, and to me, he was as punk rock as any of the bands I was listening to at the time, and he was like an OG, like Johnny Cash, another guy that I found like
Yeah,
very punk rock. But I love that about his work, and the transmission through Maharaji, who was his guru and
yeah,
teacher. Um, and I do appreciate what you just said about how it creates this space for you to, and I'm summarizing here, but kind of go into your own direct experience.
yeah.
To me, that I remember I was talking with Andrew Harvey once, a great mystic scholar, and he
Mm,
talked about the importance of direct experience, but also being aware to the best of our ability of ego, how that loves to sneak in
yeah.
the back door.
Mm,
So,
mm,
I try to be mindful of that in my own ways, in my practices. And because
mm.
I love Krishnamurti, J. Krishnamurti. And,
Oh my gosh. Huge.
but he will rail against any and all, paths and teachers.
Yeah,
And I love that about him,
me
because
too.
at the core, yeah, his stuff really, truly, deeply resonates with me.
Same.
And but there's something to me to be said for sangha, for satsang, for
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I just wanted to kind of relate in my own way to what you were saying. So,
Yeah, two things come up for me hearing that. One is that, this idea of agency and direct experience is so important. And it's so interesting because, especially in the time that we're in right now, which is such an overload of the information age where we can learn, we can know every information, every informational bit. And it's not like we shouldn't, that's great. But especially with AI coming more and more into the picture, there's nothing that AI can really tell you about, that's above your own direct experience. And so how we can have a roadmap into our own bodies and psyches and spirits in a way that is, not just like, oh, I got a hit of intuition, but actually a journey in a kind of specific and skillful way to learn our bodies, and listen to our bodies and be really in relationship with our bodies and with our inner worlds. That, in a sense, when I said roadmap, I mean, it's been such a gift for me to work with processes and particular exercises and practices that are developing my understanding of how, let's say, energies are moving through my body, how muscles are moving in coordination with each other, and how emotions are moving in coordination with the physical body, the nervous system, the energy body. And so getting to really go deeper into this is like learning a language, just like any language, that then can allow us to have more and more clarity in our own direct experience. And that seems important to me in this time that we're in.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I spent a part of my life earlier on in my journey. I fell into a bit of spiritual bypassing,
Mm,
where
mm,
the body was a hindrance, which was easy for me because I'm someone who lives with body dysmorphia and
mm.
my past addictive tendencies,
Yeah.
and it was
Right.
easy to meditate and just drop out of this.
Right.
Um, but
Right.
I'm grateful that sooner rather than later I came to understand on a very direct, as we were saying, personal, real level, like what Nagarjuna would say, the Buddhist
Mhm.
philosopher. He talks about the two truths, that of the ultimate and that of the relative, and the body being a manifestation of the ultimate as relative. But it's
Right.
not one truth is truer than the other. No, it's two truths. So to honor this experience, we were talking about, which is still continues to be a journey for me today. But I love that you're taking this approach to this work. It's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's a journey for me too. And I hope it will always be,
Here.
And I also kind of had that, like, I got really into Buddhism at a young age, or like Americanized Buddhism.
Yeah, sure.
Meditation from that angle. And also I got really into Eric Fromm. Do you like it?
Yeah, I'm not super deep, but I know Eric Fromm.
I
Yeah.
love him. I love him. I've read every book, and yeah, and I often, and then I was doing a fair amount of meditation, and for me, because I was coming from a very disembodied place, um, I mean, there was so much that was beautiful about it, but for me, that it was also kind of what you just said, like a bypassing of my body's wildness and my body's impulses and my mind's wildness. It was almost like coming already from a frozen place and to kind of stay frozen and try to come from the angle of like calming and noticing and watching, which I also find really helpful and I often need today. But at that time, it was really a bypassing for me. And that's why in the singing work, it's the opposite. It's like you're allowing your impulses to express, and you're allowing spontaneity to emerge. And so much of the time, we live in a culture that is so inhibited, and our spontaneity is actually so suppressed. And there, like I said, there's all these life force energies in us that we don't know how to find expression for. And because they're so suppressed, then they end up coming out in other ways that are, all sorts of ways that are not necessarily helpful or kind to ourselves or others. And in fact, allowing first, as a matter of process, allowing impulses and energies to express, allowing our wildness to come into a culture and society where things are so held, to me is the first step. And it's the first expression of the thing. And then from there, we craft that more. Like, this is directly true with singing. It's like we're on a journey from allowing, like we're allowing freedom in the body, freedom in our imagination, and our imagination of the music, and then moving more and more into form, into more and more advanced, let's say, musical form, if that's the path you're on, or public speaking form, or finding clearer and clearer ways to communicate. But when we try to do that first, to kind of meet the high level form of something before we've really allowed ourselves to or to express, or without allowing ourselves to express, and by instead stifling these things, then we are kind of in a way bypassing, like you said. And that is I think it's very common for people in North America particularly, and also I do work with people all over the world, and in this day and age, it's often a challenge for most people, and especially with singing, because singing is so vulnerable, or speaking, or using your voice. Like, even the freest people who are doing a lot of, movement and dance and activity, when it comes to using the voice, we tend to kind of think we need to get really upright and perfect alignment, and really make it sound a very particular way. And in fact, that's not so. The process is actually still allowing our voice to come out without restriction, and then crafting from there. Yeah.
I was listening to one of the songs from your recent album, just came out, and I was wildly impressed, truly, like, wildly impressed, because, singing is something, at least in key, I've never been good at, and that's okay. Like, I understand that's not my thing. But what I was really impressed by was the track I was listening to. I think you were on it, but I don't think you were the featured vocalist on it. But what I really liked was that in part of it, it was very hauntingly beautiful and to my ears in key. But then as it was a shorter song, and towards the end, it was almost like a scream, but not a scream. And it was, to my ears, not in tune or in key, but still absolutely perfect with the song, or just a perfect expression. And I loved it. It was very artistic and very real to me.
Thank you.
Yeah. So would that be
talking about Exit Up, which I'll give a shout to Sarah Beth Pfeiffer, who is the featured singer on that track. And she's also been a student of mine for maybe a decade, and she went through my teacher training. So she's
awesome?
Yeah.
And that's not to take away from your gift as well, because I've seen many of your videos on Instagram, and just your performances are otherworldly. I don't know how you're one of those people that I will watch. There's guitar players, there are bass players, there are drummers, there are dancers. I just watch them and I'm like, how?
Wow.
Yeah, I know, truly. And to me, though, that, as you said earlier, I feel like some people, whether they're cognizant of it or not, can get out of their own way and allow something else to flow through. And I think that goes back to what we were saying in the beginning.
It does. And it's like, why I say also that it's not like you don't actually have to be taught that. That is a gift, or circumstantial, or emerges. And so that kind of free singing, it belongs to everybody. It belongs to everybody. And it's funny because I talk about free singing all the time, and then it's so hilarious because people are like, was that free? Do you think? And I'm the free police, and that's so not the point. The point is that it's a process. It's a process of yearning towards towards freedom. And it means different things to different people. And for me, there is a difference between yearning towards an external kind of objectified sound world where your kind of attention and priority is towards making your voice do something for you, manipulating it to meet this for you, as opposed to working in relationship. But that's really, there's something different between that and between just listening and allowing. And everyone has that. Many people just have that capability. And it's true for me. I needed to learn it because I was conditioned out of it. So for me, it had to be a process of deconditioning. I couldn't find that on my own so much because I was so, like I said before, stuck, held, scared. And also probably because I'm just born with a very kind of analytical mind and categorizing mind. I liked to know kind of names of what's happening in a process. And so I like having a relationship that's very conscious with something that's very kind of unconscious. I like putting those pieces together, and I needed to learn how to do that or it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I love the word deconditioning that you used. I feel like that's something I still am in the process of on a daily basis, and probably forever will be.
Me
especially
too.
we've talked about here in the West, this consumer culture, this business of a country we are born into. It's wild. And yes, to decondition even the spiritual practices and a lot of those teachings, like to bring up Krishnamurti again. I've been listening to a series of talks he did with David Bohm, the theoretical physicist, and they are blowing my mind. And I mean, in a way that it's like, wow, even, thoughts. I'm reading one of Bohm's books, Thoughts as a System. And even just thinking about the thoughts that, the repetitive patterns and the conditioned, and how far back and are the thoughts I'm thinking even truly mine? They're happening in this experience, but are they just regurgitated? So anyways.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, though, vocal de-armoring is a way of working through all of this stuff, whether directly, intentionally or not, just processing, flowing, like we said, somatic, moving through. What you, as we mentioned in your bio, you've worked with incredible people. I won't name some that I know. You've worked with like famous musicians and whatnot, but for the average person, and not average in a bad way, the person who's not in some famous band or on Broadway,
Yeah.
If they're listening and this appeals to them, like, is this work that they can do? Is it work, like you said, you've trained students? Like, who do you think, or who have you witnessed this really like nourishes? Or is it really anybody that comes to it?
I mean, it's really anybody, but you have to be called to it, of course. I would say people who have a love of music and a desire to sing, whether or not they think they can sing on pitch, like you said, or do it professionally. Like if there's kind of a yearning in someone's heart, then the process in that sense can be very moving, because there's something about meeting, if you love music, like meeting a song with your own voice that is incredibly empowering, incredibly exciting and empowering and enlivening. And there's something, as you know, about creativity and the creative impulse that wakes us up and brings us a lot to life when it's really flowing. And then I think in particular with voice, there's something, because it's so much inside of our own bodies at a very subtle layer. Like it's invisible, it's not actually a thing. It's breath going into resonance. And so for anyone to get to experience, to anyone who wants to sing or even speak, gets to go on a path of listening to their own body and experiencing what it's like to connect into the center of yourself so deeply. It's interesting because the voice is literally at the center of the body. It's like we have our diaphragm right in the center of the whole system, and from all directions, and then it lifts and it's right behind and connected to our heart, and the breath moves. Our breath moves right through the center of us, really, through these very, very tiny vocal folds, and it's like oftentimes, I'll just say like something technical, even though you didn't ask this, it's like so much of the time when we're trying to sing with a lot of effort, then the outside of our bodies are in a lot of use. So that you might see people's necks straining, or ribs or chest or back. And again, that's not bad. Like it's actually just the order of operations. It's like, if the diaphragm is the leader of the pack, really, and kind of it strengthens enough that then the external muscles come along with the diaphragm, then the experience in my experience is much closer to the center of the body. Like you're literally feeling breath move through the center of you. And so it's really like I think of it like going in to go out. It's like connecting in to the center of self. And it's like you keep going in and in until you emerge in the universe, because you're singing, you're making music, and music is of the whole vibrational field. And so our own bodies are able to connect with the vibrational field, the collective, the platonic ideal or the spiritual kind of realm. So that's my thing for why it's for everybody. But then if it's someone who's listening who's like, I mean, a lot of people I work with, for example, are just living life and speaking, like they're therapists and they're losing their voice after long days of working with clients or giving talks, and again feeling hoarse or feeling sort of physical pain, or with their kids and experiencing like a lot of yelling or loud voice with their kids and disciplining. And because our culture doesn't actually model what it is to have a kind of healthy voice, then we learn by imitation as children and teenagers, and we have not learned. We have been conditioned to speak and yell and sing and act in a way that is not united with the whole flow of our bodies. And so this work helps us. This is one path that helps anybody get back in touch with what is actually just a birthright, and learn how to speak without pain, hoarseness. I work with people with injuries, for example. And so there's that kind of physical realm of it. And then there's also emotional expression, which for everybody, like I said at the beginning, like that's something all of us have as a birthright, is our ability as creative human beings to express ourselves. And because of all sorts of reasons, we are often afraid of doing that, and that shows up in our bodies. It lodges in our muscles, and in parts of our psyches, and then we don't associate expression with freedom, but with like fighting for it, or not being able to say what we want to say. So in that sense, this work is for everybody. I'm curious if that answers your question, or if you were wanting me to say, like, how do you do it?
Well, no, I love that you said that, because I think that did answer the question, but I would love to, if you could break down what does a session look like? When somebody comes in, is it different for each person? Is there kind of a general blueprint? Well, what is that?
Yeah, it's definitely very different for each person, especially at this point in lessons or sessions with me. So this kind of somatic voice work has impacted me on many of my students on all sorts of levels, like I've said, like as very professional singers at the top of their fields, and also especially feeling more in touch with their bodies and free, and getting in touch with their own pleasure and desire, and expressively and creatively. So in that sense, this work, depending on what someone's looking for, will look a little bit different. But we do a one-on-one work. It typically starts with very, very, very simply with the body and with singing. Very simple. Like this is, people call it like the ya-ya, like a very simple ya-ya, where primarily the first thing that we do is, first of all, sit, or most of the time, like sit and let your back rest, which is already in the vocal lesson world very unusual, because normally people are standing to have proper alignment, or sit up straight, or like get ready to work. But instead, we are inviting a kind of nervous system shift first, usually into something that's more parasympathetic. But if a person is coming in and they have a lot of collapse, for example, it's actually a kind of relaxing in order to allow life force to come. So it's not about like we relax and then we just are like zombies. No, it's like we're creating a scenario for our bodies where they can feel safe, and where our muscles can literally let go in order to allow the muscles that need to work on their own. So often we'll sit down, and then we often begin with the jaw. And most people hold so much tension in their jaws, as you probably know, and in the neck, and in the shoulders, and also in the tongue. And the joint of the jaw is super, super freaking powerful. Connects also with the pelvis. And when we can, and also jaws tighten often when we're afraid to express ourselves, or don't want to be seen, or even just walking around the world performing who we are. Often the jaw and the face, even the muscles in the face are performing or tightening or doing something. And so we try to let that go. And we try to open the mouth, which is like very vulnerable, actually, especially in front of a new person.
Yeah.
And invite this opening to open allow us to let singing through us. And basically at a very specific physiological way, when there's tightness in the jaw, we're holding back our breath. So when you start to release the jaw, the breath flows on its own. It's like I use this analogy of a river. It's like the jaw is like a dam in the river, and the breath is the water. And when you start to let the dam out, the water flows. So you don't have to do anything. It's all about what you're undoing. And a lot of the times we think we need to like do these things and like let our jaws go, like relax them, or like work with our breath in a way that's a lot of doing, a lot of like, how can I make myself freer? A lot of breath work is about that. How can I breathe more deeply? How can I get more breath in and out of my body? And what's so radical about this path that comes from Libero Canto is that it's so much undoing, because there's a deep trust that the body knows what to do when we get out of her way. And so we do these little practices. As a teacher, you're working with the person in front of you with a deep sense of observing, listening, and noticing, and not prescriptive. We're going from here to here, and we're going to do this next, but really getting to know what happens when this person is able to actually really, really for the first time let some softness or loosening happen in their jaw joint. Is the breath freeing? Because that's how you know it's actually really happening. When the breath frees, do emotions start to come up? Most of the time, actually, yes. What is that person's relationship to those emotions when they emerge? Can we put them into the singing? And what does that look like? Again, walking this kind of beautiful and delicious tightrope between undoing and allowing. And it's a very beautiful thing and a very exciting thing to have an experience of shifting and transformation and growth and movement happening in your body from a place of like, there's also not much that I'm doing, as opposed to like, oh, I have to do so much to make it happen. Right. I'm also, just on that note, though, it is more like there is a certain amount of attention needed, a concentration needed. And this is where meditation, for example, is so helpful in articulating the mind and the ability to notice. Because when I talk about non-doing or undoing, it's like we're not doing with the muscular system. We're letting our muscular system rest in a way. That's how we can imagine it. And then the doing is in our focus or in our mind, or where we can put our imagination. Yeah. What do you think about that? I feel like I'm just going all over the place.
I'm following along very closely, and it's incredible to me the way that this is being approached with people, like this is something I've never heard of before, yet it aligns in so many ways to, like I've already said a few times throughout this conversation, the teachings I've read in different approaches from different lineages, but this is like being a musician as well. I'm just so thoroughly like, wow, this is really cool.
I feel that way too.
Yeah.
I feel like for me that this is all of these, I'm so interested in what you're talking about with what you're thinking of as far as the different spiritual practices you've read and paths. But I find that that this kind of work is like a real getting to explore these concepts through the body in a way that's just so incredible. Like the concept, for example, of non-attachment. Yeah. How are we actually working with that? A lot of the time it's very mental. It's very like we're thinking about it or meditating on it, or, oh, I notice I'm attached, so now I'm going to tell myself not to be. And it's what's so cool about being in the body exploring these things is like, oh, I can notice that as I go to speak or sing, I'm actually attached to a certain sound coming out. And I don't have to just be mental and say, don't be attached to that sound coming out. Like people do that, and that's one thing. But instead, we can actually just notice it. And then let's say, because I already used the jaw, like let's say there's kind of what happens when you're attached to that certain sound coming out. Like I want it to sound rich and vibrant. I want people to hear me and think I'm authoritative. And then let's say it looks like whenever you have that idea, that attachment, the whole back of your neck is tightening and your back is starting to like, come in and up. So then we can actually, in our own bodies, we don't have to just rely on our mind, say, don't do that. Don't think of making it sound authoritative and rich. We can actually be so playful, do something like, I don't know, skip around, and we do something called chicken arms, or like do these things to let go of the physical manifestation of that attachment. And then it's like working from different sides towards the same place, and it's just so profound to be able to work with these deep concepts in a very embodied way.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
One thought I'm having is, so for someone who's listening,
Yeah.
I always try in my episodes to give, aside from just, hopefully an interesting, engaging conversation for them to listen to, something that they can actually take and implement in their life moving forward. Is there this is an incredible like process. It sounds like that they would undertake. Is there something, however, and I definitely want to make sure to share your website and where people can find more information as we wrap this up in a little bit. But is there something that you could give our listeners, that without doing it a whole session, say they're in their vehicle after work and they're stressed, or they wherever it may be. Is there something comes to mind?
Well, maybe I'll share just a few things that come to mind when you said vehicle. I was like, no, because usually don't do this in the vehicle.
Okay.
But let's see. There's a few things. First of all, I'm thinking if I should guide us actually through something or just say what to do.
And I'll say not a vehicle. They sneak into the break room at work where there's nobody else there, right? Different setting.
Yeah. Well, first of all, before going into the break room, or just like little things to do in regular life when you're even with your coworkers or friends or parents, it can feel a little bit strange and even silly, but you can practice letting go of your face, of the muscles in your face, and see if it's possible to be in conversation with someone. I've been doing it a lot this whole time with you, for example, like to imagine softening or melting the muscles of your cheeks, letting your jaw go, letting your eyes kind of be heavy in your skull, and to tell yourself, don't hold back the breath. As opposed to breathe, people tell themselves, people who are listening are probably like, I should breathe, I need to breathe. But you might try this negative phrase that's don't hold back the breath, because the breath, it happens on its own. And if you're really, really brave in a conversation with somebody, you can even really gently dangle your jaw. You can do it with me, like up and down. And notice if you're holding in your belly as you do this, or your hips, or your back. Yeah. And already like breathing is coming in. And your tongue is starting to move around in different ways. So you can, if you notice that happening, you can, as opposed to saying, oh, where should the tongue be in the mouth? It can be many different places, but let's just say you can let it rest on the bottom. Like you can imagine you're like a dog on a hot day with a tongue kind of hanging out a little. this probably wouldn't go this far in a conversation, but if you're doing this in the break room and you're noticing breath coming and you're noticing holding in your belly or in your tongue, you can dangle your jaw and let your tongue go along for the ride. I'm
watching.
Yeah, it can feel a little bit odd at first. It's like very unusual for us to be seen and to reveal like movements, and even with close people. And something that helps if you're feeling your jaw is not able to dangle, is very tight, is you can shake your head as you do this, or shake your head no or yes. Yeah. And these are just like very, very, very simple movements that you can play around with anytime, anywhere you are. Another thing is when you're speaking and communicating, you're expressing to somebody in a conversation or even in a kind of a board meeting or in a rehearsal, then you can notice your speed. Like if you're rushing to take these quick breaths, like I'm going to talk and I'm going to keep going and I'm going to keep talking. And again, that's like beautiful. It can often come from passion and excitement, but it can be something to play with noticing. Is it possible I can like trust that I can be communicating something with checking in with my own body, the softness of my belly, which has a whole lot of things, of course, that go along with it, with the back of my skull, with my upper back? Can I check in while I'm talking and just notice how is my body responding to what I'm expressing? If being really connected somatically, that's not really safe for everybody. Some people it's like really threatening, especially at first, or if you're on your own and not with a guide. So in that sense, you can notice as you're speaking more, it's again, more of this mental thing of like, am I giving myself the time to say what it is I want to say? And when I don't know, can I take a pause and give myself the gift of seeing what comes next? Yeah. I'm thinking what else? Okay, a couple other things though. So if you're a singer, or you love to sing, movement is a friend of the breath, and movement is a friend of the body. So again, like I said earlier, often when we sing, we have this conditioned response of like tightening, holding, and trying to push our voices out. And what can be really helpful, even if you're just standing and singing a song, or if you're at your guitar, is again to bring movement into your body. You can skip around the room. You can just walk around the room. Like in the sessions that I give, standing and singing is like, or standing and speaking, it like happens not until months in. Like first it's in the chair, then it's on the ground, and then you're walking around, or you're skipping, you're moving. So you want to keep your body moving. This is again, like we talked about, the opposite of vipassana or like meditation. It's let the body move. And that's kind of a step one. And let particularly these body parts that are related to singing move. So like the head, the jaw, and the tongue. Let's see if you can move them around as you're speaking or singing or expressing, even when you're on your own. And then the other thing is like playfulness. If you can get there when you're singing and speaking, is like pretending you're a little kid skipping through the woods, or pretending that you're tossing flowers off a balcony. Or if that's good for people who really like to connect with imagination, or something like rolling your shoulders, if that's accessible for you. So bringing movement, I think like that's something I can say overall is allowing movement and opening the mouth, like open the mouth. Even if when you do, it sounds to you worse, like even if you crack, or it sounds really breathy to you and you don't want it to, or even like if no sound comes out, that happens often. even when those happen, can you stomach staying with and prioritizing the release and the truth of expression over how it comes out, which is not really under your control? So letting it really, like, trying to allow how you feel in your body to take precedence over what you want it to sound like. That's like a process you can go on in your own world forever. And it's like, it's not like something we get to the end of. It's even to this day, as I'm singing really high, like high C's. And sometimes if I really let myself let go, it's no sound comes out. Maybe like the tiniest little sound. It's not that I can't sing that note. I could sing that note with a little more muscle. But as a matter of process, if I can allow myself to just let out my breath and imagine that note, that's going to be in a long-term way much more fruitful and delicious and enjoyable. And it's that kind of orientation in a long-term kind of approach is going to help you ultimately to make the sounds you want to make more, have the authority you want to have more, or just be heard and seen and appreciated for who you are, how you do sound, what actually comes out, because you develop more capacity in your body without so much trying to control it.
I want to thank you for everything you just said. I'm listening intently. It also gave me an opportunity to bear witness to my critic and my judging mind about myself, because so much of what you're saying resonates as true. And I'm watching myself. It started with the jaw comment a while back where you're talking about that. And I realized I try to do body scans every night before I go to bed. If I'm having a good day throughout the day, there's so much tightness there. And when you said that, it's like, wow. And thinking about like whatever it is, whether it's a mask, a persona, whatever it is, that was interesting. And then the other part was when you're talking about moving, and it really, a part of me wanted to, and then I watched the other part, the louder part, say, don't you dare. Don't you dare. And this is me just transparently owning, like there was this part of me that not desperately, but was like, yeah, that'd be fun. And the other overarching part was like, not happening.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this is very much appreciated food for thought for me, just in general. Absolutely moving forward and just watching. Because I know that when I spoke with, I think it was Ken Wilber on the show a while back, years ago, but he talked it all. It's a great teacher. He said, you look at a lot of the scandals that we have, whether it's priests, it's often they're the ones in the news or Western culture, but with the young boys and things of that nature. And I think Ramdas has even talked about this. People that take vows, most likely with a good heart and the right intention, but when you start repressing things, especially at a young age, and you're not ready yet, unfortunately, awful things happen, as a result. And yeah, so that was kind of a little side tangent, but
no, that's so true. And I guess I'm called to say, it's just such a kind of koan, right? Like a contradiction to both have goals and aspirations and also just allow the current moment process to unfold where it's at. It's like, of course we have goals. Like, of course you wish your jaw was just freaking loose, or like, of course, like, of course you wish that inner critic wasn't there and you could just happily play. And it's like, how we work with that is like the whole journey, And so I was called to say that for me too, this is what I mean about kind of working deeply somatically with voice and body as a way of learning a vocabulary and a language, not as a way of like, I will then be fixed. And it's just, I mean, that's an inherent challenge in all paths, but like I will say, for me, at a certain point with this, as a singer, let's say, because there were such obvious changes occurring, how I felt when I'm singing, what I could do, like literally my range, like could sing higher and lower, or with more variety, or with more ease and more joy, like all these things just actually were happening. That kind of those touch points are what made it possible for me to then accept when something's not going well, or like, but I still have all this fucking tension, or, like that. It's like, well, I do. And things have also just become more alive, become more full. And that, happening and being able to be felt in my body give me a little bit more patience for process in general, for just being in process,
I do. And for me, this was an opportunity to say, okay, I wish I was a little more free, but you know what? The awareness is there. Baby steps, maybe a little something, later tomorrow. Maybe when I'm not on the camera, I'll do a little jig while I'm walking to my car. I'm like a grown ass child. I joke I'm an 11-year-old, but yeah, you're in front of a camera, or I'm in front of a camera,
Right.
things change. But
Right.
this is also an opportunity though to soften towards myself. And it's okay, it's all right. I hear
know.
the critic, but
No.
I see you. It's okay.
Yeah, I have to practice that too. Like today, I sent an email on my newsletter, and when I saw it come out, I was like, oh man, I did a half of a floating sentence without.
Doing.
I was like so upset, because
Yeah.
why didn't I proofread? Come
Yeah.
on, and those things happen a lot.
It's the beautiful, all of it, the beautiful messiness of being human.
Yeah.
To me. So, I mean, we're pretty much out of time. I'm so glad that the directions this conversation, when I had notes, I think I looked at and maybe used one. I love when we have, or when these conversations and guests go very organic. I absolutely want to be sure to leave the audience with your website, because you, outside of just this coaching, I know you also do retreats, you co-create with other curious, wonderful humans. And, I'm sure, as I know personally, people can find that on your website, on your Instagram, wherever else. So where can people connect with you and find out about the other cool things you're doing and more about Vocal the Art?
Yeah, my website is the best place. It's marisamichelson.com. So it's spelled Marisa. And that's where, and then if you get on my mailing list, which is maybe old school to ask of people, but it's
People
where
still do it.
people a lot more comfortable with sharing about all these different retreats and processes. I have
Sure.
a vocal dearmoring intensive open sessions week at my house upstate New York in September, and then a vocal dearmoring intensive in October, and a virtual group class coming up about learning music outside of a capitalist rigidity structure. And yeah, and then there's one-on-one work, I'm actually doing my second teacher training with 4 incredible people. And there are some other teachers. So people can find out about that mostly through my mailing list and my website. Yeah. And
if anyone's on the Be Here Now podcast page, just scroll down. We'll have that linked when this goes on our social media accounts. We'll also be tagging you, so people, I'm sure, can click there, and then your website will be linked as well. Marisa, this is a real pleasure. I really appreciate getting to know you more and your work. And please, if there's anything still on it before we go, any final thoughts or anything on your heart or mind, the floor is yours.
Well, I want to say it is a real pleasure to talk to you, Chris. And I really could feel how attentively you're listening, which makes it feel very nourishing and rewarding for me to talk.
Thanks. I'm glad I could help.
Thank you for that. I don't know. Let's see. I think what's on my mind and what's very alive in me in general around why voice work and a path that is a deconditioning path matters to me is because how when we are objectifying our voices or our bodies, when we're oriented towards the world we're in with a mindset that is objectifying, then it becomes so much easier to see each other that way and ourselves that way. So when we're listening, even just as listeners to music, and we're like, oh, that's good, that's bad, kind of from an external standpoint, as opposed to tuning in to the underlying life force of a human, it can create, it's just not what I dream of and want for all of us together. And so, yeah, so in this last moment, I just wanted to drop in something I've said a few times, just like, what is it to practice orienting towards our bodies and our voices and the people around us in a way that's listening underneath to what's happening as a process, as opposed to identifying a person as a noun. That's who you are. That's how you sound. And that's something that I feel somehow voice work like this. I'm not the only one doing this, but voice work like this can really offer, is a way of becoming comfortable with an ever unfolding process and the mystery of kind of not knowing and not controlling and not nailing down. And I have a wish and a hope that evolving that kind of orientation towards life and each other can be really important with where we're at in the world today. Yeah.
I very much appreciate the way you show up in the world and what you're offering. We all do our parts in our own ways. And what else can you ask of somebody?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. True.
Yeah. What a beautiful sentiment to end on. Marisa, thank you so much for spending some time with me on the show.
Thank you so much.